Welcome, everyone, to It Tastes Different Gaming Podcast, the podcast with four different flavors coming from four different gamers. I'm your host, Russell Rowe, and I want to welcome my co host, Shane Eisterhold, Patrick Smith, and Nick Irwin.
Hey, Patrick, where can they find us?
Well, the first place you should check out is our website at ittastesdifferent.com. This is the place where you can subscribe to all of our streams and connect to all of our social media sites. You can also find us on Facebook at It Tastes Different. We're also on Instagram at It Tastes Different PC. And then last but not least is Twitter, where you can find us at It Tastes Diff.
What's on the menu for today? We order the Yakisobavan and dig into 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim. This game was initially released in November 28th of 2019. The developer is Vanillaware. The publishers are Atlas and Sega, and it is only available on the PlayStation 4. This game is basically a role-playing game, adventure game, real-time strategy game. It's got a little RP in it, a little bit of everything that, almost everything that everybody in this whole group here loves. So I'd like to start off with Patrick today. And so, Patrick, what do you think about 13 Sentinels?
This game is really fun. At first it was a little hard to get into. I'll admit the prologue and the story was a little long and a little hard to get through. But once all the stories start unfolding, the game gets better and it just keeps getting better. By the time I feel like I normally would get bored with the game, this game just keeps on going for me for some reason. The stories get really good. It's an interesting concept. I mean, the game basically has you doing multiple things. It has you do an RP, like Russ was saying. You have story for all the different Sentinels, and then you have this strategy type part of it where you're doing combat and in these things. It's all like it's kaiju. I mean, if you like kaiju and stuff like that, you'll love this. It's kaiju and robots and just doing battle. I mean, what more could you want in a game? It's really, I really enjoyed it and had a hard time putting it down. I have not beat it. I wouldn't even say I'm 50% through it, and I have over 30 hours into it. At least it doesn't feel like I'm halfway through it. Every time I look at the list of characters that I still have to go through on their story, I'm like, oh my God, I still have a trudge to go through. And you get to those points where you feel a little bored, and then you hit this story arc that just sucks you in. And you're just like, oh, I got to know what happens to this character. And you start running along the character until you hit a brick wall. And you're like, oh, I can't proceed until I do X, Y, and Z. So it has a lot. Before we dig more into the mechanics of the game, how about, Shane, what'd you think of this one?
My first thought was this is going to be different. As soon as I fired it up, the art style was like a little off, but also amazing. It was really hard to kind of grasp at the beginning. I've been pretty sick, so I didn't get as much time as everybody else, but I played and I played and I played, and last night it said, congratulations, now you can play the game. I'm like, what the hell? It was like 8 hours of tutorial alone. So, but overall, the game is pretty dang cool. It's definitely one I would have probably overlooked if it wasn't for their suggestion from Nick on this one. The anime style on it is fantastic, absolutely superb. I loved all the voice acting, the art style, the voice acting, the story. From what I picked up for each character so far, out of the six is really interesting for each one. Some's a little weaker than others, but none bad whatsoever. There's some of Patrick's favorite stuff in here, some fan service, some large-breasted anime girls, which is nothing wrong with that. The mechanics of it, as far as the story stuff, is kind of interesting. You do some fast forwarding and rewinding. The fighting mechanics of it, I really enjoyed. I thought it was really cool how each mech was had different abilities. I can't remember which character had the turrets you could drop out. Basically anywhere within a pretty good distance on the map, which is really cool and helpful in one area that I was fighting on. I really enjoy this game. It's one that I'm definitely going to keep playing while I can. It's just it's just such a good game. It's such a different game, and I think that's one reason I enjoy it so much. I've not played anything quite like it, and that's a good thing right now because there's too much copy and paste going on with a lot of games. So I'm really happy to see something unique and different. What about you, Nick? We all know this is definitely right up your alley.
For sure. Yeah. I love this game. This game is great. I do love the art style. I love the story, the combat. Like you said, I mean, there's 13, like they say in the title, 13 Sentinels. There's 13 pilots, and you go through all 13 characters' storylines throughout the game. This intermerging and intertwining storyline that they have. Lots of twists and turns within the storyline. Lots of things happen, and it keeps you on your toes. You might start a storyline and you figure, oh, this is kind of boring at first, but it kind of ends like a Netflix movie. At the end there's a cliffhanger where you're just like, oh, I got to continue because what's going to happen next. So as far as the story goes, it's great. It keeps you on your toes. It keeps you engaged with the story. And it keeps you wanting to continue to figure out all these 13 different characters and their different storylines and how they intertwine with one another. The combat is a lot of fun. After you get through the tutorial, it kind of breaks things out to where you have 3 different sections you can go into, which is the story, which is called Remembrance, Destruction, which is the combat, and then Analysis, which is basically just kind of like the lore of different various things. The combat's a lot of fun. It's a top-down kind of tactical view, which was really interesting. I mean, it works and it works well. This is kind of like the Pacific Rim of video games, right? You think of the movie Pacific Rim, and it's robots versus monsters, or the kaiju in this case, which is basically exactly what this is. So I was hoping, because they have some fantastic art in this game. So I was hoping for some more, combat scenarios where you're seeing more of the first person's perspective or a third person perspective, like down on the ground type of stuff. But it's all a tactical view. But like Shane said, there's a lot. Every 13 pilot, they have every mech has their own weaknesses and strengths, and they have their own really cool type of abilities and things like that. There's different generations of mechs, right? The Sentinels, in this case, base the name 13 Sentinels, which is the robots that you fight with. There's different generations of these Sentinels that were built, and so they all have their different aesthetics based on when they were built and what they can do. Some were, the first generation mechs were a little bit more heavy and a little bit more kind of one-to-one fighters, whereas, we go to the 4th generation mech, which are more lightweight flyers, where they can fly around the area and kind of quickly maneuver and various things like that. So, they're a little bit more airborne than the first generation, and then you have a second and a third generation, of course. But so there's a lot of really cool aspects to the mechs, and then you can, of course, upgrade them and do various things like that. So, this game has a lot of cool aspects in the combat. There's a lot of depth in the combat. There's a lot of things that you wouldn't expect as far as the combat goes, with a lot of the depth, a lot of the things that you can upgrade and kind of change out and various things like that. So it's a really cool concept as far as the combat goes. And then, of course, you have the story side of it too, which is, like I said, intertwining. And then the analysis is really just kind of give you more of an in-depth look at a little bit more definition into the various things that you come across and experience within the game. Give you a little bit more text content as far as in-depth content as far as what the various things that you see and you experience. So it's a really cool game, though. I think it's a lot of fun. It's one game that I think maybe a lot of people may have missed out on and they shouldn't, because I think this is a really cool game that a lot of people should pick up and experience. But Patrick, Russ, what did you think of this game?
I'm pretty much on board with everybody else. For what the game was made for, it is a beautiful game. We're not going into something that has to be overly graphical heavy in order to be entertaining, and that's what this game is. It's a very, very clean, very, very pretty game. The anime in it is very solid. I do feel like I'm not quite the anime watcher that the group is, but I don't mind it. I don't mind watching some really good ones when it comes to a really good story. And these stories are really good so far. Like everybody else, I get to a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, if I have to go through another, oh wait, this is getting good. Hold on a second, what's going on here? So I do have those moments as well. So where I'm pushing through and seeing some of that. The actual combat version of the game, it is an RPG. It is a classic RPG in the sense of a turn-based style. I love that about this game. I'm starting to find my way towards turn-based combat lately. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because I'm allowed to kind of set up my victory or set up my win the way I want it to set it up. As Nick was highlighting, the four generations of the Sentinels, they almost go in kind of like a tank DPS, like a melee DPS, and then you have range DPS, and then you have your support guys. It's all based around that, the four generations, but you can get very unique with the loadouts as you start to get these. I believe they're called like meta chips or meta points that allow you to buy those talents later on in the game, so that you can actually kind of like show your play style. You have to be careful too while you're playing because you can get burnout. So you want to make sure that you balance your play style and everything to make sure that you keep your streak. If there's any kind of advice that we can give to people moving on, is your win streak does help to get more experience and stuff like that. So on the combat side, it is a little bit more traditional, but at the same time, I don't feel as though it was traditional. I feel like it was a different kind of game all the way around. That's one thing I want to, kind of agree with Shane on, was this for a game that does have a lot of elements that are similar to different games. It's been displayed in a way that is different, and we've been asking for a different game. No more remakes, no more this, and so I think that's where some of this is interested us, or at least keep us playing, is that it is quite a bit different than some games that we played lately. Else I really want to add to this first initial comment is it is a very pretty game for anime, within the sense of like where a lot of other games can go. It's very classic, and I do like the era. I do like the time travel within it. All that is really cool. But yeah, that's how I feel about it. I think all four of us are kind of on the same page of liking the game, of enjoying the game. So, we open the floor to more comments. Anything else that you guys think that you really liked about this game? Maybe somebody else, got you thinking about.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, the combat was interesting because, yeah, I was with Nick. I thought you were actually gonna get to see the combat in more of a first person style, but it's more of like a tactical overlay view of the map. You don't actually zoom in. Well, I mean, it's not even a real time strategy because it's not really real time.
Well, it's RPG, but the overhead seemed more RTS.
Well, it doesn't even seem RTS. It seems more overlay, like combat tactical overlay, because you don't actually
like a tactical overview.
Yeah, it's a tactical overlay of the map. Like you can see the map of the city, and you could see, when you start every map, you pick, you have 13 Sentinels, and you pick 6 of them that you can direct control in attacking, and then the other 7 stay behind and defend. And then, you're fighting the kaiju that are coming in, and they just look like placeholders, like you would think when you're looking at a tactical map. You don't actually see, like when you're fighting the ones that they make fun of calling the tripods, even though they have 4 legs. You don't actually see that. You see like a retro style 8-bit rendition of them hovering over the map. and you send your, you do attacks and stuff like that. But that does not take away from it, because in my opinion, it looks really cool when you see the attacks and you see a giant bunch of swarm of 8-bit monsters all over the screen just get wiped out by a missile barrage or something.
When yeah, exactly what I was going to say, Pat. When you do like a missile barrage and you see that just explosion going across the map, that is pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, and the combat is really fun because, as Nick was saying, there's 4 generations of Sentinels. You have your first gen, which is the brawler type, and then the second gen is kind of the all around the support type, and then I think the third gen was the generic all around useful ones, and then the 4th gen was the aerial style combat because they were lightweight. And
I think you got the 4 and the 2 switched, but yes,
4 is aerial. 4 is the aerial because that's the one you get towards the end, and you get the Gen 4, the lightweight ones, which is the one that Yomatomi or whatever his name flies. But they're the aerial ones, and they can attack air, and there's just different combat tactics because the first gen can't attack anything in air, but they can knock them down by doing an EMP blast and stuff like that. So it's definitely really cool combat wise. It was because I thought at first I'm like, this could suck. It looks like I'm playing an old Galaga game or something, So I actually enjoyed the combat more than I thought I was going to. I did focus more on the story in the beginning because I kept getting sucked into a few of the characters' stories. Because when you first play the prologue, you unlock like 6 or 8. I can't remember how many you got unlocked right off the bat. But then you just like play through the story and you open up another one, and then you open up another one, and you open up another one, and you're like, what is going on? I got by the end you have 13 characters on your screen that you have to play through different timelines with. And when I mean different timelines, like you may play through one character in a single timeline 4 times before you've wrapped up that timeline with them before you jump on to the next one, because this game is wrought with like overlapping stories and time travel. To some points, you're just like, where am I in the whole grand scheme of things? I don't know if Nick, you ever felt that way, or you guys, but at a certain point, I was like, where am I? Is it 1984 or 2044?
85. Yeah, I did have that.
Right.
2104.
Yeah, I mean, this game takes place in different time periods.
And they call sectors.
Sectors. So you have the 1940s, you have the 1980s, you have the 2020s, I think. And then you have the 2000.
It was 40-year jumps.
50,
so what it was.
Yeah, it's 40-year jumps.
Yeah.
So you have each sector, which has a 40-year jump, and then like you said, they time travel between each sector. I mean, there's a lot to get into. For me in the group, I beat the game, so there's a lot of stuff I want to talk about that I'm not going to. But yeah, I mean, you jump across time periods, and every character. The cool thing is too is like, in order, sometimes when you get your 13 characters, you might have to do something in someone else's timeline to unlock, to continue to progress in another character's timeline. But once you do that, you understand why that was needed, right? Because that needed to happen in order for you to because when you unlock someone else's timeline and start playing it, you'll notice that, oh, hey, that happened in the other timeline, right? So, or that led up to that. So they intertwine very well between the 13 characters, 13 pilots that you have to play through.
Right.
Yeah, you definitely got to pay attention as those stories go through, and make sure that you're doing the what's that command called when you go into the subject lines and you point out a specific thing. I can't remember what they called that.
When you get into the thoughts and then you go into you want to jump. You want to jump. Yeah.
Thought cloud. Yeah.
Yeah, because every story. What's funny too is, I don't know if funny, but you have to pay attention because some of the storylines, if you in the storylines you can miss things because you don't pay attention to which storylines you've already unlocked. So an example is one of the characters where you come out in the hallway. Part of the storyline is you go to the nurse's office. The other part of the storyline is you go to the cafeteria, and another part of the storyline is you go to the break area, which is outside. And you just do, but you got to pay attention to where you're supposed to go and do, because you could just keep going to the cafeteria, going, why am I missing all this storyline stuff? But if you actually you can actually open the flow of the story, while you're in the game, And sometimes there'll even be hints that says, oh, well, you have to go to the nurse's office for this one, or you have to get the key for this one, or you have to go to the vending machine for this one. And it changes the way the stories interact. Sometimes it leads you that way by default, but some of the stories are just open-ended to where if you don't pay attention, you'll just reload the same storyline and just keep doing the same thing over, going, why can't I make it any further or progress?
Yeah, and the flowcharts are definitely, as you progress in the story, the flowcharts are going to be your best friend. They introduce those at the beginning of the game. In the beginning of the game, you're not really going to utilize those because you're just kind of following a path. But as you progress in everyone's storylines, you're going to start using those flowcharts because you're going to replay the same scenarios, like in a classroom or wherever, or in a nurse's office or whatever. And then you're going to have to bring up the flowchart and say, okay, I've already done this, right? I've already talked to this character. I've already talked to that character. I've already gone to the break room, or I've already done this. And it shows that in the flowchart. And you're like, okay, I've already done all those things. So I need to do something that's not that.
Right. It all seems at the very beginning, well, I would say the very beginning, after you did all the prologues and you started going through the stories, after you do like the third or fourth character, it seems to give you it starts to get a little confusing. But it does line out. The more you play, the more it makes sense. Because in the beginning, I looked at a couple of characters' flowcharts that were all grayed out, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I missing here? What's going on here? And it did there. And some of the storylines, I will admit, do get confusing in the earlier parts of the game, but they're meant to be that way because as you progress and you go to this one part of the story and it interjects with the part you saw in the past, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Now I understand why he was there and why he was doing that, and and stuff like that. I will say certain parts of it are kind of funny the way they line up, but the story, oh my God, it's like watching an anime that I just can't put down. I mean, I'm really wanting to play it right now while we're talking.
This game would make a great anime. It really would. I mean, if this became an anime, I would watch it because I think it would be an awesome anime. Exactly what you said, Patrick. It almost plays out that way. It's like a really great anime that you're just playing instead of watching, like on, Crunchyroll or whatever. Right. It's that same aspect. There's a lot of storylines where you go, well, that doesn't make really any sense. But when you play someone else's, and then it intertwines with that, you're like, that makes perfect sense why that happened. So it all comes to a head, right? Whereas, especially through the middle of everyone's storyline, you'll be really
good.
It gets really good, but it gets really confusing. But it all comes to a head where you're like, oh, I understand how this and this, I get it now. Like how everything interjects and how everything comes together. It starts to all combine. So you start to understand where everything's coming from and where every aspect and everything that happens comes together. So it's really good in that aspect of kind of leading you astray at first, but then it all comes to a head. So it's really good storytelling.
Yeah.
Really good storytelling.
Oh, yeah. Tons of parts that you play through that change throughout the story. Like without giving anything away, when you're playing as Juro and you're talking to Shibu all the time, and then you play the scene where you go play video games over at Amaguchi's house, and then when you play the storyline through Amaguchi's eyes, I was like, holy crap.
Oh man, I was too. I was like, wait a minute, what?
He was playing video games, and then you're like, there is nobody playing. Yeah, it's just great.
I don't want to get spoilers away, but man, that part I was like, do what now?
And it's great the way it interweaves the stuff in there because you get a major plot point and then you'll go play another person's story and it'll intersect with that and you're like, holy crap, that's how they wove this together and basically supplanted this to basically drive it home that this stuff is happening. I mean, the game gets so confusing though at some point because there is 13 pilots, but there's more than 13 what I would consider essential characters because there's characters in the game, in the movie, or excuse me, in the game that don't actually have. They're not a Sentinel, they're not a pilot, but they play integral parts in the storyline. Like I was talking, like I mentioned Shiba. Shiba is not a pilot, but he plays a pretty prominent part in the story. And then one of my favorite characters with Mimiko Sawatari she's not a pilot, but I thought she was a pretty hilarious character just because she's like boy crazy, wanting to eat all the time. That's my spirit animal right there. I'm just hungry all the time.
And boy crazy.
Yeah, I'm boy crazy. There you go. But I was just like, that's a funny character because she also has a voice kind of high pitched like the chipmunk. Like what was the girl's chipmunk name in the movies? I can never remember her name, but the female chubby chipmunk. She sounds just like her, which is hilarious.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, and the game is fully voice acted. So, I mean, the only thing you're going to read is if you go to the analysis screen and read the text there. Otherwise, it's completely voice acted. There's great voice actors in this game. One of the characters is the same character that plays Ichiban in Yakuza Like a Dragon. You can definitely tell that it's him. And his character's great in the game. And, it's all voice acted. All of the voice actors, I think, did a great job with all their characters.
And every anime needs at least one talking animal in it. At minimum.
This one has
A
that.
good point.
And Fluffy is hilarious. Just a mouthy son of a gun. Yeah, he's just. But it definitely is. As a whole, and I said it a little bit earlier, I'm not a huge anime person. But if this was an anime, I would definitely watch it. I feel invested in the characters, which for me is a huge asset when it comes to game playing. If I'm sitting there and I'm invested in the characters, I tend to play a game a little bit longer than I would normally. And I found myself invested in who these people were, and like, almost to the point of writing notes so I remembered certain things. I was like, yeah, I think that's a little much, but it was still, that's how I feel about this game, is that I would like to see these stories come to fruition.
Yeah. I would say, the having 13 main characters is hard to keep track of at times because it does. You jump from time to time and you're in between each other's stories and you're like, hey, I thought that was his name. And then you're like, oh, it's this name. And there's just so much of that going on. And it's like, it's trying to keep timeline straight while watching 13 different time travel movies that all interweave together. It's just, at some point I can't stress it enough. It does get confusing, but the stories do line out towards the end. And as Nick was saying, the mystery section and stuff like that is really great because I found myself going through there because it keeps tabs. It tracks some of the things that you've ran into. It, especially the characters. It'll say, this, you met this person and they're this and this and this and that and that. I use that thing a lot. The mystery. Sometimes I'm like, who was this guy? What was that? And you go through and you read it and you're like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. So
yeah, for a developer that can take, 13 characters. And there's more, like Patrick said, there's more than 13. There's the 13 pilots, but you have more characters that interact and that are not pilots. And for you as a player to be invested in pretty much all of them, you have an investment in all of them. You want to know where all of these characters intertwine with this story is pretty remarkable. To keep you invested, to have that many characters and keep you invested in all of them. I felt like I was invested in all of them, me personally. Like I wanted to know where each one of them turns out and what each and one of them comes to, what their conclusion was. Not just the 13 pilots, but just every character in the game. Because like Patrick said, some of them are not pilots. So, that's pretty remarkable for a developer to be able to intertwine this story with so many different characters and make it cohesive. And it felt like Vanillaware, who is the developer of this game, did a really good job with that.
Yeah, definitely, man. I can't say any more good things about this game. At first, we'd heard about this. Nick had mentioned it, and I've heard about it as before. It was like a hidden gem of the last year. And I was like, I keep hearing good things about this, and I should check it. We should check it out. And we finally agreed to do it. And then when I first saw the art style, I was like, oh no, I'm in trouble. Because I like a little bit more graphics and stuff like that. But it's like a really well done choose your own. It's not even a choose your own adventure, but like a really played out manga where you're just.
It's like a graphic novel.
Yeah, it's a manga. It's like a really good manga they haven't quite fleshed out into an anime, but it's like halfway between anime and manga. So it's like they're storyboarding it, and we're in the storyboarding part of it. I thoroughly enjoy it and can't speak more highly of it. I mean, I want more time with it. I just cannot get more time with it because every time I sit down, I realize 4 hours has gone by, and I'm like, oh my god, I've lost 4 hours.
Yeah, it'll definitely pull you in. I wished I wished I would have caught this game earlier, though. I mean, I'm glad we got it on sale, but the anime, watching the trailer, I was a little more iffish. But once you play, man, it's just that good. It really is.
Yeah,
It's definitely one of those games. It's like don't judge the book by its cover type of thing. Definitely open up and read the first couple of pages because you'll get hooked.
Yep.
for sure. Yeah. I mean, this game for me, for me it was I was watching how I figured about this game because I never knew about it was I was watching a podcast and they were talking about just various things and they brought this game up and I was just like, oh, 13 Sentinels, I never heard of this game. What is this game? And I looked it up and I was like, that looks pretty cool. I want that, And so, it was around Christmas time, and my girlfriend asked me what I wanted for Christmas. I said, I want this. And it was 13 Sentinels, and I said, I want this. It's on sale. Buy it for me, So she did. And as soon as I started playing it, I was like, oh, this is good. And, like Patrick said, we brought up what games we're going to review. And, this was one that I said, hey, maybe we should review this one. And we kind of threw it around here and there, and then we all decided, sure, let's go ahead and do it. And I think we all came out going, yeah, this was definitely worth it.
Yep, we almost missed it. I don't know how we almost missed it because usually one of us is on top of something new that's coming out. This one got missed somehow, and I'm glad we didn't miss it. I mean, it just came out worldwide in September, so it's been released in Japan longer than that, over a year I think, before it was released worldwide. But yeah, good game. I mean, I don't know. Russ, who was your favorite character? Doesn't have to be guy, girl, just whichever one you thought the storyline was the best or was most interesting.
The storyline that is the best. I'm curious a little bit more about. Is it and I'm gonna butcher it. It's Natsusami Matsusami.
Natsuno Minami.
Yeah, there you go. I like her storyline. Along with other things, but definitely like her storyline. It's the very first thing I could think of, and this is not too spoiler because it's very early on in the game that she runs into the robot. I'm just thinking to myself of just Johnny Five type of moment, short circuit type of moment, and that's probably my number one story that I enjoy. And then of course, and I do like. We were talking about it before the podcast. I do like my actor from Yakuza, which his story, that's Takatoshi, was it Hijiyama?
Yep.
His storyline is, I'm just starting to get into his a little bit deeper, and that's just because I love listening to him, and all I hear is with finesse. So, but yeah, that's those there are my leading ones so far.
Nick, so you beat the game. Who was your favorite storyline since you beat the game?
Jiro Karabe.
Like Jiro Karabe. Okay.
I think was the best storyline of the game. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, he had some really interesting concepts. I mean, he was the character we talked about earlier with the video games and all that stuff.
I mean, he's the first one you start out with, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, that's the first one you're probably going to pick as far as the ones you start out with. And
kind of playing through the game, it almost seems like he is the main protagonist out of the 13. I mean, he's got some more backstory based off of some of the other names he's gone by, but and stuff like that. But he does seem like the main protagonist.
Yeah. In the end, his was my favorite.
Okay. Shane, what about you so far? I mean, I know you've gotten just a little bit past the prologues and stuff like that. Who so far do you like out of that grouping?
Oh, God, I can't think of her name. The tough chick, long black hair. Yuki, yes, I can't remember her damn name. I love her just overall attitude. Like, yeah, you guys go do that. I'm gonna stay here and kick the crap out of these guys.
But she's like Yeah.
That's
Like a
that's her
tough girl.
introduction. Yeah, that's her
Yeah.
introduction. In the game was, dude shit rolls up. Hey, gang is trying to pick on her or something. Dude rolls up, try to protect her, and she's like, please. And he's like, she beat up my crew. He's like,
Yeah.
you did? She's like,
Right.
yeah, there was only 3 of them or 5 of them or something.
And I forget what they call her in the game, but basically the what they call her, like the nickname they give her, is basically a throwback to what they used to call the old school delinquent girls back in Japan back in the day.
Yeah, she had like a gang back in the day.
Yeah.
High school.
At her old school.
Yeah. But yeah, I was gonna say, Russ, I forgot to mention something on here. I was gonna make fun of it a little bit, just because Natsuno runs around with a robot called BJ, and Russ mentioned the robot. I'm like,
Yeah.
why do you name the robot BJ?
that was. I mean, there's a couple of mild connotations in the game.
You'll find out.
Yeah.
One of them, I don't know. I normally don't. I try to stay away from some juvenile acts sometimes, but I was rolling in tears.
I was.
I was in tears during the food. The first initial food part with the hot
my
dog
God.
and all of that, like just the mild. I say mild, but
Adolescence.
it was pretty prevalent. The writing in there was like, let's go to the edge on everything here, and it was. But it was funny, and it kind of broke up some of the monotony of the story as well. But it was funny. So yeah, hopefully folks can enjoy that.
Cool.
Yeah, and there's some aspects too, like Rez was saying. I mean, there's some story parts too where you have to just kind of let the conversation between the AIs. I mean, not the protagonist that you're playing, but the AIs just kind of conversate to continue on. So just a fair warning for everyone, because I ran into that too, where I'm like, I keep doing the same thing over and over, and it's not progressing anything.
Right.
And you just really got to let the AIs just talk, and then
Yeah, 'cause
something
that's-
else will opens up.
That's the
opens
big
up.
one, yeah. Big one, especially when you're playing as what was her name? Iori Fuyusaki, yeah. Because she does that whole scene with the food that Russ and them were all talking about, that if you don't let them finish, it just doesn't play out right.
You'll just repeat the same thing over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to
And
let them finish talking.
Yeah, exactly. And then, just pay attention to the storyline. Because I found myself not fast forwarding conversations, which is odd for me, because in a lot of these story-based games, I get the gist of it and I'll just fast forward or I'll fast read the story. But in this one, I find most of the time I'm not doing that unless I'm doing the remembrances that I've already done, and I'm like just running through to clear out all the green checks of the story parts that I've already done. But I will say my favorite so far has been Shu Amaguchi. His story is just killing me.
I like Amaguchi. He's a good one.
It is really good, especially because he seems like this kind of he's a rich kid, but he seems kind of brainless, but he's actually pretty smart. And as the story goes on, more and more things happen, and you find out that he's like doing all this science stuff. He's doing some weird science, with the AI and all that stuff. So I was like, oh, his story's getting really interesting, and especially, I just think it's hilarious how much he going after Yuki, trying to get with Yuki, and Yuki's like, I don't think so, rich boy. So,
right.
But Yuki, Shu was pretty good, and then one of the stories that I just started playing most recently was Goto, and Goto's is really interesting to me. Like, he's like in the middle of everything. It seems like every character in the game, he's in the middle of their story somehow.
Oh yeah, Goto is a main focal point of the whole list of things.
I was thinking that even with the prologue, it seemed like there was something going there.
Right. He's a pretty cool character. Like, at first I'm like, I don't know if I really like this guy. He seems kind of nosy. But, once it gets toward the end, because it's not really a spoiler, because you'll lock his prologue out pretty quickly. Like,
you can't do much of his story at all in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, because once you get through like 13% of it or 14% of it, which is like the first story mission or two,
you get everybody else to 80.
It locks it out, and you have to get like pretty much everybody else, all 12
to 80.
Other characters to 80%.
Right,
before you can unlock it. So, his is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, so far I've liked all of the storylines. I've been sucked in by all of them. I mean, Megumi's is really interesting. She's the one that we were talking about interacts with the cat, Fluffy.
Yep.
And Fluffy's just a huge, for lack of a better word, he's a huge D-bag, but he's hilarious.
That was my
interact.
favorite thing through the prologue was when you finally get Fluffy and it's like, no freaking way. That's
Right.
awesome.
All right. So, yeah, as the story goes on, he just berates her more and more and more, and you're just like, he's a cat. Why don't you just kick the darn thing? At some point, you're just like, just grab him by his tail and throw him out the door. But it's really great game, and if you love RPGs and you love like some bit of strategy and stuff like that, if you're an anime fan, you've got to pick this one up.
For sure. Yeah, I would. If you have a PlayStation 4, you should have this in your library.
Yep.
Yes.
Agreed.
Well, cool. Anybody else want to mention anything else about this one? I mean, we can go on and on about all the characters, but if we don't care if we're going to ruin something.
Yeah, that's probably the
Especially
best
me.
thing about the game was just the quantity of characters and the interesting aspects of each character that I've encountered so far.
We basically had Shane's favorite character picked out before we even started playing. It was the nurse.
I'm not that way. I'm not into
Morimura.
that.
Morimura.
Morimura. Yeah.
Morimura,
I'm not
yeah.
that much into the fan service.
Whatever. As soon as she came out in that
She's
spandex,
definitely
Shane had to
fan
take a
service.
5-minute break. Yeah, Shane had to take a 5-minute break.
Her
it
and,
was more about 2 minutes.
Aori are fan service because there's only two
Yeah.
that they show
Aori,
parts throughout the game. But
Russ's favorite one's like Sporty Spice. Natsuno Minami reminds me of like Sporty Spice.
I like Natsuma. She's a good character though. They're all good characters. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, for my final thing, it really comes down to it is all the characters in this game are really good. The story is really good. The combat, you have that tactical view, which you at first, like Patrick said, you're kind of like, I don't know about this, but it works out well, and it works out really good, and you end up liking it. At first you're kind of put off by it, but you end up liking it at the end.
Oh yeah.
Not at the end, but I mean, like as you start playing with it, you're like, oh, I kind of like this. So all of it works really well together, and some things that you think the developer of this game, you're like, with the combat or with the characters or whatever, you're like, I'm not quite sure if they made the right decision. In the end, as you progress in the game, you find out, oh no, they made the right decision. This works perfect. And so I think all around this is a perfect game. I think it's a great game. And like I said just a minute ago, if you have a PlayStation 4, you should have this in the library. This is a great game to play, a great game to have. And I think this is a hidden gem, pretty much.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
So,
Definitely.
pick it
Really
up.
good game. Yeah, definitely. I'm glad we didn't miss this one because I don't know. I can't believe we did miss it, to be honest.
Well,
Cool.
this is one of
Anybody
those
else?
moments I'm glad somebody was thinking out of the box.
And Nick got it for Christmas, so he pulled it out of the box.
Yay, Nick's girlfriend.
Yeah, like I said in the podcast, they mentioned it, and I was like, "What is that?" I hadn't heard of it, and looked it up, and I was like, "Oh, this looks pretty cool. I want that." So I'm glad I picked it up. I'm glad I said I wanted it, and even if my girlfriend didn't buy it, I would have bought it for myself. But I'm glad it's something I picked up because then I can experience. I can bring this out to the rest of the guys and say like, "Hey, you should definitely play this game. This game's pretty cool." And I think we all enjoyed something that we probably would have missed out on it if not.
Russ, you got anything else?
No, I think it is a little bit quicker, but we are trying to make sure we don't spoil it, but we can't express enough how much of an easy buy this is for anybody that enjoys RPGs and stuff like that. Just get out there and do it, but no, that's it.
Yep.
Yeah,
It was
worth it for 60, but 30 is just such a huge deal.
Yeah, I would have paid full price for this one. It's a great game.
Oh yeah, for sure. I would have paid $60 for this for sure.
All right, well, we all agree you should check out this one. You should check out 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. We hope to catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening.